So, welcome everybody to Preservation New Jersey's virtual series Q&A with PNJ. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping to start. My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Director of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch. But for this event, I am wearing my Preservation New Jersey board member hat. I am tonight's host, but I'd like to give a quick shout out to our hardworking executive director, Kelly Raffel, our president, Paul, our education committee chair, Mark, and our office coordinator, Dale, and all of our other board members. Everything we do here at PNJ really is a team effort. If you're not familiar with Preservation New Jersey, just a little bit about the organization. It was founded in 1978. And it's a statewide member-supported nonprofit historic preservation organization that promotes the economic vitality, sustainability, and heritage of New Jersey's diverse communities through advocacy and education. You can learn more about what we do and how to get involved on our website, preservationnj.org. We are perhaps most well known for our annual 10 Most Endangered Historic Places in New Jersey list, which draws attention to remarkable sites and to their many challenges. We hope that listing them will be a catalyst for change and that positive solutions can be found for their preservation. We're working on that 2024 list right now and can't wait to tell you more about it. We also publish instructional and informative toolkits and other educational materials and publications, maintain an informative newsletter, and more. Again, our website is preservationnj.org. So for tonight's program, Preservation New Jersey ventured into virtual programming, as so many groups did during the pandemic, and this informal series, Q&A with PNJ, was part of that. 4 years on, we've kept up with it as it's a nice way to reach people in the comfort of their own homes. So Q&A with PNJ seeks to highlight voices across New Jersey's historic preservation community and bring their knowledge and expertise on a wide variety of historic preservation topics to the public. So today, as you know, since you registered for the program, we are chatting with the State Historic Preservation Office and the New Jersey Historic Trust, obviously key players in preservation throughout the Garden State. So from the State Historic Preservation Office, we have Kate, and from the Historic Trust, we have Glenn. They will make some prepared remarks, and then we will have time for Q&A, which is, of course, the best part of this program. So Kate Marcopul from the State Historic Preservation Office, would you be kind enough to kick things off?
Sure. Thank you, Melissa. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So my name is Kate Marcopul, and I am the administrator of the Historic Preservation Office. The Historic Preservation Office is part of the Community Investment and Economic Revitalization Program within the Department of Environmental Protection. And we are committed to enhancing the quality of life for the residents of New Jersey through the preservation and appreciation of our collective past. Our mission is to assist the residents of New Jersey in identifying, preserving, protecting, and sustaining our historic and archaeological resources through the implementation of the state's historic preservation program. The origin of our office can be found in the National Historic Preservation Act, the nation's central historic preservation law. It was enacted in 1966 at a time when Americans were becoming increasingly aware of the damage being done to their heritage by modern development and public programs such as the interstate highway system and the urban renewal initiatives. The National Historic Preservation Act established the legal and administrative context for the National Historic Preservation Program and also created a number of important programs, organizations, and processes required to carry out the program, including mandating that every governor designate a state historic preservation officer to administer certain federal programs. The Act also established the responsibilities of the state historic preservation officers, who are the officials responsible for administering the National Historic Preservation Program at the state level. So that's why our office is sometimes known as the HPO, and sometimes known as the SHPO. The HPO wears two hats. We wear our federal hat when we are administering the programs of the National Historic Preservation Act. We wear our state hat when we're administering the state programs. HPO currently has 20 full-time staff and 3 hourly employees who actually are not reflected in this chart. Our staff is made up of historians, architectural historians, archaeologists, GIS specialists. We have a finance person, and we also have clerical staff. So what is it that we do? Well, there's a lot of confusion about what the HPO does. And I think part of the confusion stems from the fact that there's 6 different programs within state government that have a mission related to preserving historic places and history. And each of those organizations has slightly different responsibilities. Before I start talking about the work that the HPO does, though, I think it's probably a good idea to highlight some of the specific things that the HPO does not do. And hopefully I can help dispel some common misconceptions about the HPO. So for example, we do not regulate paint color. That's a question that we commonly get from members of the public. We don't give out plaques. We don't give out money to individuals or nonprofit organizations. We don't operate house museums or historic sites, and we don't regulate purely private actions. So what is it we do? Well, we administer 8 program areas that are comprised of both federally mandated and state mandated responsibilities. In fulfilling these responsibilities, we work with everybody. We work with federal and state agencies, local governments, private developers, local organizations, and the public. There's a lot of overlap among the different program areas. For example, the review and compliance historic property surveys that are done feed into survey and inventory efforts of the office. And private developers who are working with us to qualify for the federal historic tax credit also submit National Register nominations for review as a requirement of that program. Technical assistance and training and educational initiatives are provided by all staff across all program areas. And all of these programs relate back to the broader societal benefit of historic preservation. So this is probably review for many of you, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, so the focus of all of our program areas is historic properties. And historic properties, for our purposes, is defined as a property that's listed in or eligible for listing in the New Jersey and National Registers of Historic Places or under a local ordinance. There are 5 categories of historic properties in the federal and state historic preservation programs. Structures, which are created for purposes other than human shelter, for example, boats or lighthouses, bridges, or canals. There are objects, which are primarily artistic in nature. They're small in scale and relatively simply constructed. An example of that would be fountains or statues. There are buildings, which are created principally for to shelter human activity. And examples of buildings would be barns or houses or office buildings, hotels. And then there are sites. Sites are locations which possess value regardless of the existence of building structures or objects. They could be designed landscapes, they could be places where battles occur, and they could also be archaeological sites. And then there are historic districts, which are significant concentrations or collections of buildings, sites, structures, or objects, which are united either aesthetically or historically. So the National Register of Historic Places is a program, one of the programs that we administer, and it is actually a federal program. It's created by the National Historic Preservation Act. It's administered by the National Park Service, and it's expanded through nominations by individuals, organizations, state and local governments, and it's administered in New Jersey by the Historic Preservation Office. The National Register of Historic Places is known as the official list of the nation's historic properties that are worthy of preservation, and it includes properties of national, state, and local significance. The HPO, as I said, administers the National Register of Historic Places in cooperation with the National Park Service by advising applicants on resource eligibility, whether they meet the National Register criteria. We review and evaluate nominations and evaluation of nominations for conformance with the National Park Service requirements. The New Jersey Register of Historic Places was created by the New Jersey Register of Historic Places Act of 1970, and it's the official list of New Jersey's historic resources of local, state, or national interest. It's closely modeled after the National Register program and specifically designed to complement the National Register. So the process of listing a property on the National Register is the same process to list it on the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. It's one set of nomination forms, one document that achieves both tasks or both goals. To date, we have 1,462 individual properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places. We have 345 historic districts listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and there are 59 National Historic Landmarks in New Jersey. Now, the review and compliance section of our office administers or reviews projects in compliance with both federal and state law. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act is probably the one that people might be most familiar with. And the Section 106 process requires federal agencies to take into account the effects of their projects on historic properties. So it applies to any project that's receiving federal funding, permitting, or licensing. And the Historic Preservation Office gets about 2,000 project reviews under Section 106 each year. The New Jersey Register of Historic Places Act is a state-level protection law, and it applies to state, county, and local projects that may affect a resource listed on the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. It's the strongest state-level preservation law in the United States. And each year, the HPO reviews about 230 to 250 projects under the New Jersey Register of Historic Places Act. The Division of Land Resource Protection within DEP issues different permits that require consideration of historic and archaeological resources. And so the Historic Preservation Office assists the Land Resource Protection Division in reviewing those permit applications when there are freshwater wetlands permit applications, Coastal Area Facilities Review Act permit applications, or waterfront development and upland waterfront development permit applications. And we review about 600 to 1,000 of those permit applications a year. Now, while the circumstances in which we review a project are different, there are some commonalities among all the different regulatory requirements, whether it's under federal law or state law. The common regulatory principles at work are that the presence of a historic property is a public benefit, and that the public involvement benefits the process of considering effects to historic resources. There are 4 steps that are basically common in the review of projects under any of those regulatory requirements. So they start with identifying historic properties, move on to assessing effects, you explore alternatives to any adverse effects that might be caused by the project. And if it's not possible to avoid or minimize adverse effects, then you come up with measures to mitigate those adverse effects. The Historic Preservation Office is also, we also have a survey and inventory program. Part of the National Historic Preservation Act responsibilities require us to maintain an inventory of historic properties in New Jersey. And so we collect information about historic properties through the administration of our other programs. Every resource that's identified is eligible for listing on the New Jersey National Registers of Historic Places through a regulatory review, or properties that go through the National Register nomination process. They all are collected in our GIS system. That system is called LUCI, which loosely stands for Look Up Cultural Resources for Yourself. It's a way that the public can get access to all historic properties that have been identified in New Jersey thus far. And it's continuously being updated. Using Sandy recovery mitigation funds, we have been undertaking a large scanning project of our library. So we have scanned most of the cultural resource survey reports that we have in our collection, and we've made them available through the Department of Environmental Protection's online portal called Data Miner. References to those reports have also been incorporated into our ArcGIS Online, which is why Lucy is now referred to as Lucy 2.0, because it has this increased functionality. And there are current efforts underway to scan and make nominations that were prepared for the New Jersey National Registers of Historic Places to make those available as well. So stay tuned for more information about this effort as it continues to evolve. The Historic Preservation Office also administers the Certified Local Government Program. Certified Local Government Program offers municipalities the opportunity to participate more directly in state and federal historic preservation programs. Participation in the CLG program requires that a municipality have a historic preservation ordinance and a historic preservation commission conforming to the specifications of both the municipal land use law and the National Park Service approved New Jersey Certified Local Government Guidelines. As a certified local government, a community is eligible to apply for Historic Preservation Fund grants for a variety of local preservation activities. The level of funding available each year is contingent upon our annual appropriation from the National Park Service. So, grant applications are available from the Historic Preservation Office annually. And generally, we have been able to award about $115,000, $120,000 a year in CLG grant money. CLG grant funds have been used for historic property surveys in communities across the state. They've also funded design guidelines, resiliency plans, and publications that promote local historic properties. I should mention that the historic property surveys that are completed as part of certified local government grants also feed back into the survey and inventory program, and that information is also captured in our in Lucy 2.0. We currently have 44 certified local governments in New Jersey, with another 16 communities who are interested in pursuing CLG status, and 4 communities who we say are CLG curious. They've been inquiring about the CLG program and what that means. We meet as part of this program, we meet with local governments who are interested in the program to discuss the program requirements and the benefits of participation. We review draft municipal ordinances in advance of an application submission. And then we perform annual monitoring to ensure that all of our certified local governments are in compliance with the program requirements. The Historic Preservation Office also works in cooperation with the National Park Service and the IRS to administer the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program for New Jersey. The Historic Preservation Office is typically the first contact for developers interested in qualifying for the tax credit and works with developers to advise them on whether proposed work meets the standards. Often for those of you who might not be familiar, the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Credit offers a 20% tax credit on qualified rehabilitation of income producing properties, historic properties, when that rehabilitation meets certain federal requirements, namely the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. So the Historic Preservation Office staff is usually the first contact for many developers in determining whether their program or their project meets the standards, and they rely on technical assistance and review from our staff to help them meet the standards so that they can qualify for these tax incentives. We also consult with and advise the Economic Development Authority in New Jersey on the administration of the Historic Property Reinvestment Program, and that is essentially the New Jersey State Tax Credit Program. It was established through the New Jersey Economic Recovery Act of 2020. So we provide technical assistance to EDA and developers in support of transformative historic properties rehabilitation projects for properties listed on the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. So essentially, we review detailed technical plans and specifications to determine and to ensure compliance with state and federal requirements. We also have some easements and some covenants. So, sometimes easements and covenants are used by federal agencies who would like to sell federal property out of federal ownership. And so sometimes in those cases, they will place preservation covenants or preservation easements on those historic properties to ensure that those properties are preserved once they are transferred out of federal ownership. Sometimes in the past, the HPO was assigned to have these preservation covenants. More recently, we've been working with the New Jersey Historic Trust on the trust holding historic preservation easements through a lot of these sale of federal property situations. But Glenn might be able to speak more about that during his presentation. We also sometimes, through our work in the various regulatory reviews, like through permit application reviews, we can recommend preservation covenants be placed on archaeological sites that are identified through regulatory survey of projects but are being avoided by project activities. And we have a small number of covenants on historic properties that were a requirement of National Park Service funding that was used to rehabilitate this storm damaged property in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. The last program area that we have is administration, planning, outreach, education, and technical assistance, which basically covers all the other activities that the Historic Preservation Office staff is engaged in that we've not yet already discussed. So as many of you know, we coordinate, collaborate, publish, and distribute the New Jersey Comprehensive Statewide Historic Preservation Plan. We just completed that planning effort at the end of 2022 for a plan that went into effect in 2023. And that plan is meant to guide effective historic property preservation decision-making throughout the state, and is used by state and local government organizations, nonprofit groups, interest groups, and the public to guide historic preservation activities throughout the state. We also participate in planning and staffing of the annual statewide Historic Preservation Conference. We provide training and topics related to historic preservation. When we have the funding to do so, we have been able to produce publications that provide specific technical assistance in specific subjects. Example on this slide is the Flood Mitigation Guide for Historic Properties that we were able to produce out in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, which provides homeowners and local governments with a tool in understanding how they can apply flood mitigation techniques for historic properties in their communities. And then we also have been participating in the DEP's Youth Inclusion Initiative for the past several years. This initiative provides participating youth with opportunities to develop some of the technical skills necessary to pursue a career in environmental protection and historic preservation in New Jersey. The program focuses on providing opportunities to youth from communities that have disproportionately less open space or historically lack natural lands or access. And so we've been working with this youth through this youth inclusion program for about 5 or 6 weeks throughout the summer, providing them with hands-on experience in preservation activities so they can understand what a career in historic preservation might entail. And then we also provide technical assistance in a variety of topics to all kinds of folks who reach out to the office with questions from time to time. So that concludes my presentation for this afternoon, or for this evening rather. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So much information packed there. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions, but before we get to those questions, we get to hear from Glenn from the Historic Trust. So Glenn, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Let me just get to the slideshow. There we go. All right. Again, thank you, Melissa, and nice to see everyone visiting us tonight. This is great to have people interested in what we do. My name is Glenn Ceponis. I'm the executive director at the New Jersey Historic Trust. Just from background, I've been at the trust for nearly 20 years, but I've been the executive director now for a month. Started the 1st of January, so it's great to be in this new position. But like I said, I've been at the trust for quite a while. So anyway, again, thank you for joining us, and let me continue here. So what is the New Jersey Historic Trust? We've been established, we were established in 1967. Actually, we were established at the same time that the New Jersey Historical Commission and the Historic Sites Council were established. Again, something that Kate mentioned as far as when they do their review with the Historic Sites Council. We're considered an in but not of state agency, and we're located within the Department of Community Affairs in Trenton. By in but not of state agency, we are a state agency, but we're actually governed by a separate board of trustees. And these trustees are comprised of 12 citizen members who are appointed by the governor, as well as 3 ex officio members representing the Department of Community Affairs, the department that we're located in, Department of Environmental Protection, of which Kate serves on our board as a representative for DEP, as well as the Department of Treasury. So, and who is the trust? Who are the trust? Again, I'm Glenn Ceponis, the executive director. Just for some background as far as who we are. My background is in historic preservation and architectural history. We have archaeologists on staff. We have other historic preservationists. We have historians. We have professional planners. We have heritage tourism specialists. So all of all these folks are the ones who are administering and working with our programs. So the mission of the New Jersey Historic Trust is to advance historic preservation for the benefit of the state's diverse population today and future generations through its education, tourism, stewardship, and financial investment programs. The trust saves New Jersey's heritage through its strengths and strengthens its communities. Forgive me. But how do we do this? So we do this through our various programs. Our primary program is the Preserve New Jersey Fund, which is a grant program. But we also have, and I'll go into actually a lot more detail about that fund since it's our primary function at the trust. But we also have a revolving loan fund. We have an emergency intervention fund, the Discover New Jersey History License Plate Fund, which if you see those Discover New Jersey History License Plates, the money that for you purchasing those plates and your annual renewals goes into a kitty that, again, we distribute grants from that funding source to do heritage tourism projects. We also work with the New Jersey Cultural Trust, managing their capital historic preservation programs. This year, for the first time, we've also worked with the State Council on the Arts, again, managing and going through their capital program dealing with historic buildings. I know some of you may be familiar with the Journey Through Jersey website, which is our heritage tourism site that we manage, providing blogs and other write-ups dealing with visitor-ready sites. As Kate mentioned, we also hold historic preservation easements. And we hold both term easements as well as perpetual easements. And when Kate was referring to requiring either feds or even municipal or other state agencies who are transferring title out of public domain into private domain, typically there's a historic preservation easement that's placed on a property in perpetuity in order to provide protections, the same protections that the New Jersey Register Act or Section 106 may have had while it was in public hands. So that continues on now, even though it's in private hands. Those protections are still there with the easements. We also do education, as Kate mentioned, with them, as well as oftentimes the Historical Commission. We sponsor the State History and Historic Preservation Conference. Quick little plug this year in Jersey City, June 5th and 6th. Hopefully people can come and join us there for a day and a half of many things preservation and heritage tourism. We also work on Historic Preservation Commission trainings. We've done this through the Rutgers March program out of Rutgers Camden, but we've also done the trainings through the trust itself too. And again, giving local Historic Preservation Commission members a chance to, again, just bone up on what's going on in the preservation field, and hopefully, again, making it for them in order to better serve their communities. We hosted, oftentimes, again, in cooperation with the Historical Commission and other groups, best practices workshops on anything from, actually, we've done everything from window restoration work to how to better organize your board of directors if you're on a nonprofit history organization, to doing strategic plans. We also present at conferences. Myself and a colleague presented at the League of Municipalities conference last year, dealing with how to pre-qualify contractors for historic preservation projects. So these are all different ways that we fulfill our mission. But I guess the main focus of our programming, though, is our grant funding opportunities. So our primary program, again, is this Preserve New Jersey program. As some background, the funding comes through a constitutionally dedicated fund from the corporate business tax. So a certain percent is taken from the corporate business tax every year, and it goes towards not just us with Historic Trust, but it goes to Green Acres for acquisition of open space, farmland acquisition, Blue Acres acquisition. So again, back in 2015-16, the public, passed a amendment to the state constitution dedicating this fund, and it's a certain percent of the corporate business tax that comes in, and then we being the trust, gets a small percentage of that in order to do our grant funding opportunities. So again, with our grant funding opportunities and most of our programs, eligible applicants are either agencies of government, county, municipal, or state, or nonprofit agency or organizations. 501c, doesn't have to be a C3, but a 501c organization. Those are the two types of organizations that our grant funding can go towards. We cannot fund private citizens. Unfortunately, that's one of the main questions we always get is, I just bought an old house, what do I get funding to restore it? We're hoping that perhaps in the future more of the state tax credit can go towards some of that. But right now there's no good funding source for private homeowners. But anyway, so since 1990, the trust has awarded over $200 million in grants. We've been lucky, again, since it became the dedicated source of funding through the corporate business tax, that we've been averaging 10 million or so a year that we've been able to hand out to historic preservation projects throughout the state. And what I'm going to do now is actually talk a little bit more about the types of those, what types of projects those entail. So one of our grant types through the Preserve New Jersey Fund is what we call Historic Site Management Grants, or HSM grants. These are for planning documents, non-construction activities such as historic structure reports, preservation plans, doing feasibility studies, condition assessments, archaeological studies, historic landscape reports, and construction drawings, which oftentimes then will lead to doing actual capital or construction work. We also fund the preparation of nominations to the New Jersey and National Registers of Historic Places. So all of these are part of our Historic Site Management Plan, or HSM grants. And one thing I should mention with regard to all of our programs, all of our grant programs, they are matching grants. You see in this case here for historic site management, all of our planning type grants, it's a 3-to-1 match. So we provide basically 75% of the total project budget. You provide 25%. and our grants for this type range from 5,000 to 750, I mean, to 75,000, sorry. So to get $75,000, you're working with a $100,000 project. So you see how that match works. Another type of planning grant that we've always funded, but has just become a little bit more, we're trying to promote it more. So we actually have our own application for this now. And that's for municipal, county, and regional planning projects, what we call our MCRP projects. And these are for, typically, we're seeing more of these from municipalities, counties, with preparation of design guidelines for downtown historic districts or whatever. The preparation or revision of the historic preservation component of a master plan, or developing historic preservation ordinances if you are perhaps starting up a historic HPC. Also, it's for preparation of architectural surveys, which again, we want to identify as many historic properties as possible. So again, through this planning grant, you could do surveys to identify those that perhaps eventually may make it onto the national or state historic registers. And again, we've also worked on developing with the Historic Preservation Office their latest historic preservation guide to doing historic preservation plans and HSRs. Another thing that I mentioned earlier through Journey Through Jersey, but we provide heritage tourism grants. Again, it's another one of our planning grants, same matching, same amount of money available for that. But this focuses on heritage tourism type projects, doing a visitor readiness assessment. If you have a historic house museum, making sure it's ready to accept visitors, which could be, do you have public restrooms? Do you have a place for a bus to pull up to park to let visitors off? So it's doing that kind of evaluation, developing performance and evaluation means, looking at interpretive planning. It could be signage, it could be other types of programming to better interpret your site to the public. Also, part of that would be the design and fabrication of that interpretive signage or literature. We've funded in the past marketing plans and studies, as well as, like I said, the design and fabrication of that marketing material. But we also do training and workshops. We've funded both everything from developing a walking tour to actually having someone then train others in whether it's doing the tours or other things. So again, trying to enhance linkages to other heritage tourism sites. So those are our three kind of planning HSM type grants. The other type of grant that we offer are capital grants, and we have two different levels of capital grants. The level one, which is basically the $5,000 up to $150,000 grant. And again, that's a 3-to-2 match. So that's 60%. You provide 40%. So a $200,000 project is getting, or $250,000 project is getting $150,000. And these are for actual construction activity. So actual preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, providing barrier-free access. You could also use it towards interpretive signage. Archaeology, which can, depending on how large of a dig it is or how extensive it is, could also fall under construction activities, especially if you're getting, let's say you're doing some sort of, you're getting a capital grant for us to do a construction activity. If you're going to do any ground disturbing, we're going to require you to do some sort of archaeology, again, to make sure that we're not disturbing any important archaeological finds at the site. But again, our grants can go towards doing that archaeology. We do fund some new construction. Typically, that's dealing with either ADA accessibility, but also what we call visitor amenities. So let's say your historic house museum is fully restored, but we just don't have accommodations for the public coming in. So maybe it's constructing a new bathroom facility. Maybe it's actually creating, paving a parking lot for bus service, providing better lighting, again, so that the visitors are safely coming to your site. again, something that we funded in the past, but again, we're trying to emphasize more, again, because we're trying to focus on, not focus, but kind of stress some of the heritage tourism aspects of historic preservation. So again, by funding these visitor amenities, it's helping bring more people to these historic sites. Part of our eligible activities with construction too is for the non-construction part of that. So we allow up to 20% of our non-construction activities, like paying for a historic architect or other kind of preservation consultant to oversee that construction project, to develop those plans. So we understand that there are expenses to construction, but rather not just paying your contractors, but you need the professionals to help guide that construction work as well. So again, our funds can also go towards paying that those non-construction related activities up to 20%. So I mentioned the level 1 grants. We also have level 2, which is again, it's a same activities, but these grants range from over $150,000 up to $750,000. And these are a 1-to-1 match, 50-50. The one type I'm not showing here is what we're now calling our level 3 grants. And that's basically, it's a multi-phase grant. So you come, you apply to us for a multi-phase grant. Each phase needs to be $500,000 to $750,000 in requests. So it either has to be like $1 million to $1.5 million overall project budget. But you could come, basically apply to us once and get these multi-phases, again, if our evaluators and all deem that this is a project worthy of not worthy of trust funding, but eligible for trust funding and does well in the review process. But again, same types of things: preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, archaeology, but it's a larger dollar amount. The bad news about all this, and it's great that we have money to hand out, but they are competitive grants. So when you do apply, we always have more requests than monies available. We have been fortunate, like I said, that through the corporate business tax, we've had a reliable source of funding, roughly 10 million per year, sometimes up to 13, 14 million. But again, that's dependent on how much money is collected through the corporate business tax. And let's see. We're going to get into some. This is what we do. So we see some before and afters here, also known as the Apple Tree House in Jersey City. When they first applied to us, you can see what's on the left, and then after the trust funding, the end result. Also, the Hunt House in Mercer County, before and after for this. This is now being used actually by the county recreation department. That's where they have some of their offices, and it's a trailhead for one of their nature trails. And up in Warren County, Ramseysburg Homestead, again, I might say this a little deceiving because the interior hasn't been done yet. They actually have a current grant with us that they're working on finishing up the interior work. But again, the before and after, again, what our construction money goes towards. And just, I guess, a quick reminder, because I want to make sure we leave time for questions. Our next grant round, our applications are going to be due April 18th. We're actually having a kind of a virtual Q&A, one of them tomorrow, but once a month. Again, if you have questions about the application, but always feel free to reach out to anyone at the Historic Trust if you are working on a grant, or even have a question that's saying, would this be eligible? Feel free to reach out to us. If you go to our website, njht.org, you'll get contact information for all of us. And then I guess we're going to turn to questions now. So I will stop sharing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Applause are always tricky in the virtual environment, but thank you so much, both Glenn and Kate, for just kind of demystifying the work that you do for those in the audience who might have been interested in more information. Let's open it up to questions. A reminder that we are recording, so you can unmute yourself and ask your question, or you are welcome to type it in the chat and I would be happy to read it for you. Who would like to kick things off? We've got a comment in the chat from John Beekman about One of the sites Glenn highlighted operating as the Museum of Jersey City History, encouraging you to check out mjchistory.org.
Yeah, and real quick, I'll jump in and just say thank you to Kate for the pointer to Lucy too. I'm going to be geeking out over that for a considerable long time. That gray literature that is embodied in those reports that SHPO has is some of the best local history literature out there, and I applaud your efforts to get that digitized and accessible, because that's just some of the best scholarship that exists for local history. So yeah, thank you for that. I gotta wrap up here at the library, but yeah, thanks.
Thank
And I
you.
might add to that too, is that both of our websites, both the SHPO's website, excuse me, and the Trust website, we also have tabs for other links to other resources and stuff like that. So it's a good place to explore. We'll give you a lot more information and more detail of what we both were discussing this evening too.
Thanks for joining us, John. Okay, other questions? You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it in the chat. Here's a question in the chat from Carol. Are there legal advisory resources available on your websites?
I unmuted myself. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in Lacey Township and trying to save the Warden House. I think some of you I've already met or talked about this. The township is selling it, and I've basically been doing this by myself, and I spoke with a lawyer today and she said I need a land or, in other words, we have to prove that the house needs to be saved versus the township selling it to a developer and destroying it, like it's going to get knocked down. And I have no legal background, so I don't know how to start.
So, Carol, are you looking for recommendations for the types of attorneys who might be able to assist you?
I was told it's land use, it's title searching. There was a resolution back in 1918. It was a gift to the township by a millionaire, and a judge was on the committee and a lawyer's on the committee, and now the township basically says the title is clear and they can sell it to a developer and knock it down. Don't know.
Gotcha. So, Kate or Glenn, thoughts on resources that Carol should begin to pursue?
Yeah, well, I know I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give you any legal advice. But I know when we do HPC trainings, actually one of the folks that usually does training with us is basically a land use lawyer. So I mean that she's the one who tends to speak towards historic preservation and the municipal land use law and stuff like that. But again, I am not here to give legal advice.
Well, the interesting, and congratulations on your new position.
Oh, thank you.
The eligible, that the house became eligible in 2005, and it was Dorothy Guzzo who made it eligible. So I have been in touch with, and I've called everybody, and we put in the application. It's kind of at a stall right now because they're asking, I can't get in the house. It's locked, and they want more pictures and proof that the floors are original and the fireplaces are still behind the walls. So I'm at a stall, and everybody wants to do a protest, and it's a big mess. So I just want to, and what I was told is, and it was a land use, probate, and estate, and somebody that knows case law. And we have no money, you know what I mean? Like, there's no one, in other words, if the township wanted to save it, they could save it, but the township is now selling it. So they're my only resource. Sorry.
So, Kate, I assume you can't recommend attorneys, right? But
I just been looking for advice. If somebody could read the papers and say, this is good, this is bad. I'm not looking for any. But that's where we are right now, is we did a cease and desist order for this sale of the house, but that's still. I don't know what to do next. That's why I'm here.
So
Anyway,
we-
it's not, sorry.
So we don't
Oh.
have any, specific information about attorneys who, have a background in historic preservation law, and as Melissa said, we can't recommend anything. Have you been in contact with staff in the Historic Preservation Office about the situation?
Andrea Tingley?
Andrea, okay.
Yeah, Andrea recommended that, and she said enclose the letter by Dorothy Guzzo, which we did. And then her office received the application and it's now asking questions like, are you sure the floor is original, or the fireplace is original? So that's now in a stall. The application is stalled because I haven't been able to get back.
I see. So, I mean, one other thing that occurs to me is if there is a proposed development that would occur on the property, it needs a permit from Land Resource Protection through DEP, the Historic Preservation Office might have an opportunity to review and comment on that, either if it needs a freshwater wetlands permit or a CAFRA permit, which if you're in Lacey Township, I'm thinking it might be in the CAFRA zone.
But I don't know where CAFRA zone is, sorry.
It's usually an area along the coast, coastal New Jersey. So I think that, because the property exists within our files, if land use or Land Resource Protection receives a permit application and they see that it coincides with the Warden House, you said, which is in our files, they will send it to us for review. And so there may be another opportunity for us to take a look at that through that process.
I'm pretty sure they've just established that that they did a gov deal in, I think it was May. And it just said, buy the property. It's got 2 buildings that can be knocked down. And that's all the deal said, and the developer bid. It hasn't closed. So,
And you said it's not listed, it was just determined eligible. I think that's, one of the things that if it was listed, then there'd be a little bit more of that.
correct, it's not listed.
Yeah.
That's why we put in the application. So now it's a waiting game of, are they gonna sell it before the application would go through? But now I can see that that's not gonna happen. So it's to do in addition, it's a legal situation now,
Yeah.
I think,
I mean-
but I don't know how to.
And what I know I've seen in the past, and it's really kind of old school, but it's grassroots efforts. It's getting the community behind
That's what
you
we're doing.
and making a big noise as city council, the people that are voting for them. Again, when there's not these other avenues to go down, it's sometimes it does come down to the grassroots and who can, yell the loudest and get their attention.
Planning a protest, so I've never
Yeah.
done that before, but here we go.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a beautiful little house, and like I said, I think it's fallen through the cracks. At one point, there was a historic buildings group in town, and it was built in 1850. It's been in every historic document. It's been talked about forever and ever, and now it's just and no, the township didn't tell anybody they were selling it. They want rateables. They want commercial
Mhm.
on the property, so it's a long story, but I thank you for your input, and I'm sure you'll hear from me in the future. So if you hear Warden House, it's me.
Well, we wish you luck.
Oh, I thank you. I need tons of it.
Keep fighting the good fight there, Carol. We have a similar
you.
legal question from, I believe it's Thaler in the chat. Do you want to weigh in, or would you like me to read the question for you, Thaler? You're on mute.
You're welcome to read it.
Okay, so you're on an HPC and you want to know if NJMLUL recognizes parks as right-of-ways. Does that question make sense to you, Glenn and Kate?
I'm not sure what you mean by right away. I mean, you're in an HBC, but I guess is the park part of a historic district? Is it, I mean.
There's a home on the park that is a historic district, and there's a proposed, but the applicant is saying a park's not a right of way, and I was wondering if there was state law saying that a park is a right of way. If the MLUL has said that, if there's been case law. And I guess all of
Is
this.
the reason because you're trying, you have purview over things that can be seen if they want make any alterations to a house only from places that can be seen from a public right of way. If it's a
Yeah.
public park, in my mind, that's a public right of way. It doesn't have to be a road or street. I mean, if it's a public place, that's public. But I'm not a lawyer. but I mean, Kate, I mean, wouldn't that be considered a public right of way in your mind?
What you're saying makes sense, but I'm not a lawyer either to be able to answer the question. I guess you said that you're on a historic preservation commission, and I would wonder if the municipality has an attorney that you could speak with about that very question.
And also going back to your ordinance too, just to see exactly how they list what your purview is regarding review.
I suppose the bigger question is we often have legal questions, and would just be really nice to know who we can reach out to in the state office when we have legal questions. I see you nodding, Carol. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think probably anybody from either of our staffs is going to tell you that we're not lawyers, right? So we can only tell you what we understand that the law to say, but we can't provide legal advice, of course, because we're not attorneys. So, we certainly do talk to people from time to time who have questions about provisions of state law or federal law, and we can tell them what our understanding of it is. But if you really wanted legal advice, I would think that the township attorney would be a resource for that.
Right. Well, in this case, as we could also just provide you, examples that we've seen before, just, this is what has happened in this case. But again, every ordinance is written slightly different. Each community is slightly different, but at least that might, give you some idea of what's been done in the past.
Thank you. You're just also nice, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
They're nice, knowledgeable, and also honest, right? A lot of speakers want to give you an answer when they are not actually qualified to do so. And I appreciate the honesty of our speakers here. Other questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself or you can type them in the chat. Okay, well, we are at 8 o'clock. We like to keep these to an hour, nice and tight. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out to hear a bit more about the work that the State Historic Preservation Office and the New Jersey Historic Trust do. We hope that you can follow up on their websites and get all of the resources that they have there to help you in your own preservation journeys. Kate, Glenn, any last words?
No, just thank you, everyone. Again, glad to see a turnout like this. And I know we touched on a lot of information, so feel free to reach out to either office. I'll speak for you too, Kate. Either office staff is always more than happy to try to help out however we can.
And someone just dropped in the chat, how do I get a copy of this recording? We like to put all of our free educational programs on the Preservation New Jersey YouTube channel. So you can go back and find 4 years worth of Q&A with PNJs up there. Just trying to make these resources accessible for everybody as freely as possible. Thank you so much again to our speakers, and thank you everyone for coming. We hope to see you at the next one. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.